This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 140.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another video. All right. So we rarely have conversations with SEs or SE managers that gets as vulnerable as this conversation. And today's guest is Russ Moore, and it was just, to put it mildly, we get in depth into how he wasn't good at his job, and at some point he figured out that he needs to get good, and now he's like the head of sales engineering. So it's just sometimes you're not in the right place in your life to want to excel at something, which happens. Sometimes you have other priorities, but as soon as that mental shift happens and it clicks in your head that you need to be good at your job, it's good for you to be good at your job. Imagine doing a job that you don't enjoy doing for the rest of your life. It's not an easy thing to do. So being good at it is one way to actually get to enjoy your job. So that's the conversation today with Russ, and it was a great conversation. And let's just jump into the show. All right, we are recording, Russ. So I already asked you this question, but yes. I'm going to ask it again. How are you?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you mentioned that you listened to all 132 episodes of the podcast, so you don't need me here. So go.
That's right. I'm just going to interview myself today because I've learned so much from listening to the plethora, the just deep volumes of knowledge I learned from all 132 episodes. But look, in all seriousness, it's amazing what you guys are doing. I love learning from other leaders in sales engineering. And I also love how you guys are helping the community with no SE left behind. I think that's just great that you guys are doing that. So kudos to both of you.
Oh, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Ramsey's definitely, I got to give kudos to Ramsey. Personally, I haven't had too much of an impact there. It's actually really cool how even myself, like I'm a big, or rather I'm someone that's kind of come up thanks to Ramsey's teachings in many senses, and that I didn't know what SEing was.
I'm blushing here, so let's stop talking about that. But I'd love to hear more about who you are, Russ, and where you're from and what you do before I turn red.
Yeah, well, I want to hear more about like your and Benny's relationship. That sounds really interesting to me. Sounds like some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But so look, I'm Russell Moore. I'm the head of sales engineering at Mobileiron. Mobileiron is a unified endpoint management and security platform for mobile. We've been around since 2007, shipped our first product in 2009. And recently we announced we're going to get acquired by a company called Ivanti, along with Pulse Secure. And so my background is I actually studied French and political science at Rutgers University, graduated in 1993, didn't know what I was going to do. And my brother called me up and said, I'm working for this ISP, it's called IDT at the time, selling internet accounts over the phone. Would you like to come join me? And I went and I started making 50 grand a year, which was just a lot of money for me at the time. But as I was doing that, working the phones, selling what we called PPP accounts all day, I realized I didn't love that so much, but I did notice that there were network engineers that seemed to rule the company, and they were like 22 years old. They were traveling the world, walking around with little Cisco 2500 routers in their hands. And they were cocky, they were having fun, and they were making a lot of money. And I said, I think I could do that. I'm smart. I'm smarter than those guys, I think. So I got a job. I was able to like transition because it was the wild west days of the internet. Anybody could do anything. And I got a job working the bottom rung of this ISP, just building out internet in different cities across the US, making less money, but learning my trade, like learning how to make cables and install racks and routers and modem banks and things like that. And I did that for a while. And because I dealt with lots of vendors that were trying to sell us stuff, I got recruited by a company called Bay Networks. They were doing routers and switches, and I parlayed that into a sales engineering career, which probably started around 1997 or 98. And so I've been actually working in sales engineering since then. So about over 20 years.
Wow. All right. I'm looking at your LinkedIn. So you worked at
Yeah.
Nortel.
I worked at, well, Bay Networks was acquired by Nortel.
Okay.
So I did for a while, but I went to a startup from there. That's my first real sales engineering gig was at Copper Mountain Networks.
Okay.
We sold DSLAMs, which allowed telcos to do high-speed internet over copper wires.
So you've been in SE since, according to this, 1999, which is 21 years.
Yeah, man, I'm getting old. I might be wrong about 99. That makes sense. That's when I started working for Copper Mountain Network.
You don't look a day old over. What's a good number?
40. I go for 40.
35. You don't look a day over 35. How about that? I'm 36, but you don't look a day older than 35.
Thank you. It's all the partying that keeps me young.
Yeah, man, whatever works.
I guess.
So, go ahead, Benny. You had a question?
Just a quick one about that. I mean, so we were talking a little bit before the show about how there's a whole bunch of resources out there for sales engineers, but 21 years ago, that obviously wasn't the case.
Yeah.
How did you navigate the sales engineering world before you had any sense of what to go look up and before having any resources to look up for it?
Look, back then it was. Well, that is a good question. So I did and I didn't. I'm not going to say I was the best sales engineer in the world when I first started working for Copper Mountain Networks in 1999. I lived in New York City. I was a single guy. I liked the lifestyle, right? And so I got to travel. I got to work on big deals, many of which we won, but we didn't always. I became expert at certain things, but I was still confused about other things, that I like. Frame relay networks and ATM networks. I learned a lot of it on the job, and some of it I didn't learn. And quite frankly, I didn't become a much better sales engineer until my 30s, and I wasn't motivated to do that. I was quite happy, working from home, traveling, having a nice lifestyle, and enjoying all of that. But I wasn't the best. I didn't grow up, honestly, until my 30s.
How did you know you weren't the best?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I just knew I wasn't as good as I possibly could be. I wasn't spending, hours and hours. Like I told you, two technologies I didn't know that well, ATM and frame relay, and I had to deal with them all the time. And I didn't spend enough time mastering those. I was good enough to get by, but I could have been much better at that. And there weren't resources at the time, so I would follow the lead quite often of the salespeople I was working with, some of which were great and some of which weren't so great. So I had various levels of success for a while, and when I was younger. And it's because I just wasn't taking my career seriously. I don't know. Have you talked to other SEs that were like that at one point? I just, I had different motivations.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, personally, I haven't talked to too many. The Ramsey would know more than, or would have spoken to more than me. But just even maybe speaking from my own experience, I mean, yeah, I'm still in my 20s. I didn't even know that sales engineering was a thing prior to me kind of falling into it. And it's starting to, as I kind of meet more people through the show, as I see guests, well, even just seeing somebody like Ramsey's been doing it for a while, but seeing someone like yourself who's been doing this for quite some time as well, it's cool to kind of know that this is something that is a really viable career. And so, and as I kind of started to get these realizations, it definitely motivated me more to get more involved, I suppose, with sales engineering, but also just the sales process and things like that. Whereas before, you have different motivations. You're getting a paycheck from a job to live your life and maybe just kind of do what you got to do. But yeah, ever since I kind of started to realize that this is something that's more than just a paycheck, and there's actually quite a bit more to it, it's definitely given me a stronger appreciation.
Yeah, it took me years to fall in love with sales engineering. I did eventually, but it's a dirty little secret of sales engineering that some jobs are easier than others. I've had jobs where I've been doing presentations and POCs and evals all day long, but I've also had some where, hey, I only had 3 or 4 meetings a week and I had a lot of free time. And I enjoyed that in my 20s. I don't think I would like it now, but that's, back then it was great.
Fair. It's kind of cool actually hearing it from you, something like that, because you're somebody that's, I don't know, pretty well established in their career. You've done quite a bit as an SE, but to
Mhm.
know that, you came from relatively humble beginnings of not knowing, or really, I don't want to say not caring so much about where it would take you, but at least not knowing where it could potentially take you. And then you put in the work, I suppose, to get yourself to be better and to eventually love it. It's good to see. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in that same boat in that early stage of maybe not feeling the most comfortable in there, not knowing if they love it or not, and it eventually growing to something better.
So
Yeah.
Russ, what changed that made you fall in love with the role? Was it the company you're working for, that, or the technology? What made you fall in love with it?
Working for better companies helped. Like working for companies like where I really believed in what they were doing, I think was really helpful. So I've been with Mobileiron for 8.5 years now. I joined in 2012, where it was really like we were in the eye of a hurricane of like mobile. I'd come from BlackBerry, which was good, but I knew at BlackBerry things were changing. Technology wasn't as hot anymore. And really at Mobileiron, like I just loved what we were doing. I thought it was important. I loved our technology. I loved getting our roadmaps even because they were exciting, like things that we were going to do. And I think that's one of the things that really motivated me. Winning is another great, motivator, right? Like not only do you make money, that's actually the less important part for me, but it's just the endorphins that you generate from winning and the goodwill it generates within the whole company. That's like a really wonderful experience that you just want to like continue to capture. And then about the same time when I started working for Mobileiron, I decided, I was more interested in leadership too. I had a lot to say, and I started to find ways, to say them at Mobileiron, and I wanted to have a seat at the table, the leadership table, and so I started, acting in a way I think that would, eventually help get me there. That was a process, but that's really when things change. It's this job that changed me the most.
So, like, if I'm looking at your career, right, you spent
Yep.
almost 10 years in a job that you were good at, but you weren't really being pushed to get better at. And then all of a sudden it hit you and you took off. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm a late bloomer. Yeah, well, I moved around a lot, right, in the 2000s. Like I had a lot of 2-year stints, even some 1-year stints at companies, startups, and I lived through a crash of the telecom sector, right?
Yep.
When I worked at Copper Mountain, we were selling to CLECs. Do you even know what a CLEC is?
Nope.
It's a competitive local exchange carrier that was supposed to compete with Verizon or Bell or any of the incumbents. And there were lots of these companies, and their stocks were riding high, and then all of a sudden one day they were worthless. And the company I worked for, our the hardware we were selling, we didn't have anyone to sell it to anymore, really, because the technology we had chosen was great for the startup market, but wasn't what the incumbents wanted to sell. So I forgot what question I was answering. I don't know how I got there, but
Well, you can answer whatever question you want, but
yeah,
what we were
yeah.
talking about, like you're the late bloomer because like until you got to Mobileiron, that's when you said this is the career for me. Before
Well,
it was
part of it was market conditions and not finding the right product market fit for me as a sales engineer.
okay.
So like I rode through a crash. I went through companies that weren't trying to sell voice over IP early. And so there weren't that many success stories for a while there. Now there's a couple really well-known success stories, but like Twilio and Cisco did well out of it, but not that many companies did. And it took until I landed on mobile. I hadn't found my sweet spot, and I just happen to have more of a passion for what I'm doing now.
So if I basically, it's okay to be an SE and not happy with being an SE. It could be because you don't like the role, the company you're in, the industry you're in. So you just have to try different things. Do I understand that right? Is that what you tried?
Well, look, you can't say that all SEs are happy. Yeah, I mean, for me, that was kind of true. Finding the right fit has a lot to do with technology. Also has to do with culture at the company that you're working at, the challenges of the job, the way that SEs are valued in the company. A lot of things have to come together, but when they do, it's like a really beautiful thing. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest here, right? There are lots of SEs that aren't happy in the roles they're in or with the technology they're working on, but they have options.
Yeah. So I talk to a lot of SEs and mostly on the podcast, and they project most SEs. Like a lot of SEs are happy, but even those who aren't on the podcast, they project that they are happy. So I kind of have a skewed view of that, mainly because it's a podcast and it's public, and they don't want to say anything negative on a podcast about sales engineering, potentially. But like, it's good to talk about that. That not this role is not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's a quick little follow-up. I hate to kind of be a dead horse around the topic, but like, did you, even when you were in a company maybe that wasn't the best fit for you, were you already sold on the idea of sales engineering, or was that even something that came only with going to a company that really aligned with you?
And that's a really good question. I don't know what I felt in my 20s. I feel like I was really happy with the lifestyle and the freedom it afforded me. Honestly, I also, I thought that, I was going to be rich by the age of 30. There's another thing, right? Like stock options. So I had options in a startup that went public and unfortunately it became worthless. But at one point it was going to make me a millionaire. So I thought, hey, maybe I'll have a second career.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were some financial disappointments, many due to my the fact that I wasn't very wise at the time. And so yeah, it just took me a while to grow into it. I can't say like I was in love with it in my 20s. I thought, this is going to be a great way to get wealthy in tech.
Which is
this is real talk today.
Yeah, well, we don't mess around.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this, but it's kind of fun.
Well, you opened up the door, so we're just going there.
No, I know I did.
So then you became an SE at Mobileiron.
Yes.
And I'm looking still at your LinkedIn, and it seems that every year you got promoted. You said you got interested in leadership, and every year you got promoted into a higher leadership position, you could say. Not many people can get that, right? I want to be an SE leader, and I haven't found a company that has that role, right? How did you find a company that has that role? How did you get to go into that role? And how did you make the decision that you want that anyways?
So I think a lot of times those roles didn't exist. So some of the roles were willed into existence. Some of them were a happy accident, but when I got serious about my career, I decided to become as good as I could at that role. So first off, I was a really good sales engineer, and very confident. And then I started to raise my hand. So it started with little things like maybe I didn't like the way that a diagram looked. It went north to south. So I made one that was east to west. I said, hey guys, have at it. I sent it to the sales engineers. And people were like, yeah, I like that. Or, maybe there was an opportunity, maybe a new version of iOS came out. And I said, hey, I'm the first to do this. And I made a video and a guide on how to do it so you guys can do it too. So whenever I did something, especially when I did it for the first time, I would share. And I think that helped me a lot. That helps like an SE's reputation. And then you get to, then you get to become the expert in whatever that technology is. So it starts, I think, with peer recognition. And once I had done that and built myself up, we were rolling out a SaaS product at the time. This is 2014. So we were even a little late on that. And I knew the person that was in charge of carriers and operators at Mobileiron. And we were doing deals with Deutsche Telekom and Swisscom and BT and AT&T at the time. And they had to launch our cloud platform. And I went to this person, maybe it was at SKO, and I went and sat next to him during presentation. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, I bet you're going to need somebody to enable these partners and get them set up, because there's a ton of APIs. You have to integrate to ordering systems. You have to teach them how to use this. You have to train their sales teams how to use it. There's just, you have to overcome the security audits and things like that. And you have to sponsor developments with, our product team to respond to that. And he said, not right now. But then I was on his radar. That role didn't exist. But actually, about 3 months later, he made that role exist. And so we kind of willed that role into existence. It helped that we were a growing company. It's harder to do that at a company that isn't growing or has flat revenues. But that was the first opportunity I think I made for myself.
So I want to point out, you didn't go to him and say, how can I help you? You went to him or her, I don't know, and said, this is what I think you will need. Right. Which, I don't know. I feel like if I ask someone, what can I help you? Like I'm creating a job for them, because now they have to think of ways for me to help them. Whereas you went in with specific, exactly what they need. Maybe they didn't need it at that point, but at some point they will need it. And, they will think of you the next time they need it. So that's great.
It also kind of shows that you're thinking strategically too. So it's kind of cool for somebody or for a leader to see that this other person has, I suppose, a vision for the company that might even be a little bit different than their own, which obviously shows you have some great leadership potential. So that's really cool.
Thanks.
Obviously, yeah.
you got approval from Benny.
Yeah, right, whatever.
The most important thing.
We can end this now then.
Yeah. We'll come back to part 2 later.
In a few months.
So another thing I noticed, you were you put yourself out there by creating all these videos or documents, whatever. What can people do today to get themselves out there? Since I think there's a lot more options.
Well, there's so many. I mean, look at what you guys are doing, right? Nobody's paying you to do these 132 podcasts that you've done. You are putting yourself out there. Podcasts are actually so democratic. They're such a great way to do it. And in fact, like I've done a lot of that. Like every year Apple comes out with 2 big releases for business. The iOS version 14 and one of the dot releases. And there's a lot of enterprise customers that want to know what's in there. And so I started doing podcasts on that. And I started doing that I got on the radar of like some industry figures one of them was at Tech Target, a guy named Jack Madden. And because I was doing these, we decided to collaborate eventually. I got on his radar by posting those. And so that was a really good outlet for me. I kind of made that happen. I did the same thing with Android. And it's because I was like interested and passionate about it, like you guys are about your podcast, and wanted to share it with the world, but it had benefits for me. The other thing I think you need to do is as an SE, you need to get to know your marketing team. So the marketing team has a lot of opportunities that will, allow you to showcase your talents. So they might be, we have a webinar that we want to do with this partner. Or you might even say, I like this partner. We should do a webinar together and reach out to one of their field CTOs and propose it to the marketing team. If you become expert enough in the technology and you make friends with the marketing team, and in particular, like the head of communications at your company, if you can get to that level, they will start using some of the resources that they already pay for to help you get out there as an expert for your company. So everybody has PR agencies, right? They're like tech PR agencies like Highwire. They do the joint press releases, but they also get you placed in articles. Like Forbes is the biggest pay for play one that I've seen quite a lot of lately, but there's a lot of publications. And so I became known as an expert in 5G because I started writing about it a lot. And now, now I get interviewed by reporters sometimes because the marketing department thinks of me if anybody talks about 5G. And the company that we use for PR, Highwire, they pitch me. They pitch articles, and so that also helps, increase my online presence. But I do it because I love it, actually. Like,
just a quick, are we talking about product marketing team or the corporate marketing team, or it could be either?
It could be either, but I think it's more the corporate marketing team, especially when it comes to like having a PR agency that like is willing to publish you. The product marketing team can also be super helpful though, because usually they're running the events like the CISO events, like companies like Evanta and others where they do CIO roundtables or CISO roundtables. Where they will invite a number of CIOs or CISOs, supposed to give you an at bat with with prospects, and they do them regionally, and you might be able to sit on a panel. That would be through the product marketing team, or to be a speaker, or you might be proposed as a speaker for an industry event by your product marketing team. So both teams, I think, are really useful for that.
Fair. Yeah, I could definitely speak to I guess allying yourself with the product marketing team. At the last place, did a lot of webinars and whatnot, and got to work quite closely with them. It's also just really good to know, especially as an SE, when you're pitching your product out to the masses. It's just good to know what the marketing team is doing, I guess, in parallel to that, and just making sure messages are consistent. Also, speaking as somebody that's just starting a new role at a company that I found to be pretty challenging, at least to get started. Well, it still is, but getting better. The marketing team is such a cheat or a hack to kind of get yourself to understand what it is that you do and what value that serves to the market. At least in my experience, I found it to be so helpful rather than trying to kind of figure this out on my own way. Just seeing what the marketing team feeds to the market with respect to how this product is going to help you do this, or reading case studies that they've put together. It's incredible. And yeah, no, definitely can't overstate how important that is.
Yeah, I totally agree. Good product marketing is like worth its weight in gold.
Totally.
Well, these are like, if you have consistent messaging between marketing and sales engineering and sales, half the job is done. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we talk to a customer. The messaging has been done. We just have to tweak it to that specific customer. But that being said, like, from your SEs who work for you, what are you expecting them to do in terms of putting themselves out there for the benefit of the company?
That's an excellent question, and I think you need to look at every SE individually, right? Because some of them are not going to be doing webinars, but the ones that have that skill and that desire to do that will. Some of them can't. They're okay writers, but they might not. You might not want them writing articles and blogs. Or you might help them to learn how to do it. So like personally, I've got a lot of SEs that work for me and have worked for me for a while that have kind of raised their hand at some point, got noticed just like I got noticed to do that job rolling out our cloud services. And those I try to develop according to their individual skill set. So one of them who's been working for me like 4 years now is the best at writing KB articles. The KB articles are good for fellow SEs, for customers, and for prospects. And he also does product videos, and he's fabulous at that. And so we focus a lot on that, and that really helps everybody win deals and increases our customer satisfaction. I have another SE that I think is a good writer. I encouraged him to write one blog, which I loved, and he did it because I wanted him to, I think, and he hasn't done another one since then. I was hoping to get him involved with that, but that's okay. Maybe that doesn't work for him, or it doesn't yet. But he's still got that blog under his belt, and even that should be in his resume. And I've got another that wants to be a CTO at some point, and so that I try and give that person as many opportunities as I can. And that might mean the next time we're going to do a webinar with a partner in the security space, like Ping Identity or something, that he's the one that presents that. And I just want to feed opportunities to people like that. Yeah, I give them opportunities. Not everyone pursues them, but the ones that do, it's beneficial to everybody in the company, I think.
For that person that wrote one blog and hasn't written another one, what do you tell him that's in it for him or her to actually go out and write the blog? What's the benefit for them?
So I mean, for him, he was a new SE, and this is actually a great story. He was a sysadmin. He actually worked in our IT team, and he raised his hand. So he was on my radar for 9 months before I could hire him. And a lot of people don't love folks that come from IT, but I have really excellent experiences with the guys that I've hired from there. That's an aside, but I told him, look, you need to establish yourself a little bit. He's an Android expert, but not everybody knew he was an Android expert. So this blog kind of put it out there that he was. It did enhance his reputation, but one and done isn't enough. He actually needed to do, I think, a little bit more, like to sustain that. And he wasn't sure he wanted the notoriety either, I guess. So, he was a little shy about that, or maybe not ready for it yet. That's okay. I'm patient. I'm willing to develop him over the time, because I think that, he's so talented.
So what are you telling him to convince him to keep writing? Or what will you tell him when you think he's ready?
Well, I haven't been on him recently to keep writing. Sure. I've been focusing on something else with him, which is, boy, these guys are going to watch this and they're going to know who they are. He's focusing on getting his CISSP right now. Okay. And a couple of my guys are, because I want them to focus on that aspect of their career development to become security experts. Our company shifted from being a pure mobile company to a security company a few years ago. And I feel like I'd like some of our SEs to be known as both mobility and security experts. So we've been working on that right now. I think we're going to circle back around to it again. But at the moment, I want them to focus on that, because that's like a lot of work doing a CISSP.
Okay. And for that person who wants to be a CTO and will do the webinar.
Yeah.
Like, what will happen if he messes up? Like, what's the worst that could happen, and how can they make sure not to mess up on that webinar, which will most likely be high stress situation for someone?
I don't think, well, he's already done the webinar. He didn't mess up, but if he did mess up, we would just work on that. I mean, messing up on a webinar, I don't think is the end of the world. We all make mistakes and can learn from them and recover for them. I don't think messing up on a webinar would do any lasting damage.
Yeah, the reason I was asking that was because a lot of people are afraid to do it because they're afraid to mess up, right? And
yeah,
I just wanted to highlight that even if they mess up, it's just a step in the right direction, possibly.
Oh, look, I totally agree with you. Nobody's perfect. I don't want anybody to work for me that's perfect. So,
My
that'd be
mom says
boring.
I'm perfect, but most people disagree. Anyways, Benny, you had a question?
Yeah, well, even just quickly about webinars and messing up. I don't know. I definitely found it's pretty awkward at first, right? Because you're kind of presenting to a live audience of who knows how many. But I don't know. When you do find that you mess, at least when I found that I would mess up, it's sometimes fun just to roll with it. And these people are maybe sitting in this corporate show more or less that you're putting on for them. And so, if you mess up, just make a joke or something. And even if it falls flat, I mean, it doesn't matter because you can't hear them anyways. So just imagine. It's great.
Sense of humor is like, that's a really important SE skill, I think. And like hasn't COVID like just opened up like the real world to our customers and partners? It's like, it's okay if your baby cries, or if there's a dog on your lap, or if somebody rings the doorbell while you're doing these things. We're all human, and if anything, that makes you more endearing to me. I can identify with you better if you make a mistake or if something unexpected happens.
100%.
Yeah, I actually had to start a meeting with a customer with my child on my lap. And I just spent 5 minutes introducing them to each other. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So my 5-year-old started telling him the story about Octonaut, like what happens in the movie. But the guy was really happy. My customer was really happy just talking to my son for a few minutes. And then I kicked him out of the room. But that's how I started and worked out for me.
Well, you're exploiting your son. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Why not? I'm Lebanese. We can do that.
Do you want to ask a quick little question, if you don't mind, about you being a sales leader, just a leader of teams in general? You've talked a lot about what motivated the particular people on your team. How did you kind of come to those, not conclusions per se, but how did you find it was best to find those motivations of your team members rather? Was it just by asking them directly, like, what do you want to be able to do? Or did you have other ways about finding what it would be that motivated them?
I have one-on-ones with all my direct reports. Like, I shifted roles a little bit recently, so I have less direct reports now, but I still kept all of my one-on-ones. And so, we're constantly talking, we'll talk about the deals that they're working on. But what I'm more interested in is, what do they find interesting about their jobs? What do they want to do? What's their career development? That's not just for, your 360-degree review that you do once a year. Your development needs to be constant. You need to feed your mind and build your career and work on the things that are going to give you satisfaction in the long run. And so I asked them, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And I don't expect them to say, I want to be the SE doing the role I'm doing right now, 5 years from now. I expect, to hear the truth. And sometimes that truth doesn't align with being an SE long-term. Sometimes it might be, well, I really like to work in product management. And so if they say that to me, then what I will usually do is call up the head of product management, if I know him at that company, and say, look, I have a guy that's got an interest in product management. Can he maybe join your Scrum meetings or whatever you guys are doing, your sprints, once a month, just to see what that role is like, and maybe for you to even get to know him a little bit in case he eventually wants to transition to that role. So, I'm very happy to help somebody grow into another role in my company. It's wrong to hold people back, which I've seen before also. It just, makes for unhappy people. So I want to help folks, I want to help make happy sales engineers or product managers or happy people.
That's amazing. That's probably the best way to go about it for somebody that is on people's teams, and to know that a leader or your mentor or whatever it is truly has your best interest out for you, not to just keep you on their team so that your team is better, is the best way to go about it. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, I'm very enlightened.
Okay. Yeah.
And humble. All right. I want to talk to you for another few days, but
Yeah.
we don't have that much time. So we're going to move on to the not so fire round. And these are the
Okay.
same 4 questions we ask most of our guests. And Benny usually kicks us off.
Yeah. So, again, a lot of things that we covered today. And I think you maybe alluded to it. I don't know if it was before we started recording, but maybe not. What do you love about being a sales engineer or otherwise being an SE leader?
So as an SE leader, I love mentoring people. I just love that relationship, helping them grow. That's really so important to me. As an SE, I love not only the relationships I have with other SEs, but like the sales team, and even product management, even the product managers I spar with, which happens. I love, building those kind of deep relationships. I still love the travel, and I miss it so much right now. But and boy, that's great bonding time too. Have you ever just, gone to Columbus, Ohio with the account exec, and you go see the customer, you have a good meeting, and you go out for a nice meal, and that's a really nice part of being a sales engineer. So I do miss that. I love learning new things, like explaining or sharing new technology with my fellow sales engineers, or new ways to do things, and processes that will help them. So those are all things that I really, really appreciate about being an SE.
Speaking of SE managers traveling, my former company, my manager was out of Raleigh. And whenever he came up to Canada, it was an event. Like, I know for 2-3 days, we're going to go out to dinner every night, and we're going to just laugh. We're going to meet customers. It's going to be fun. It's an event. Now my manager is based out of Ottawa, and he's also my sales manager. So we're always in constant communication, and we both have our families here. So there isn't that much of an event. And I always felt like that event was it builds a bond between you and your manager. And I have a great relationship with my current manager. It's just, there isn't that 3 days of night outs and then going to work, half a week. So
Yeah. And what's that steakhouse chain that everybody goes to in Canada? What's
Moxie's,
Yeah.
Montana's,
Okay.
the Keg.
The Keg, that's the one.
When are you coming up to Ottawa? We'll go.
You want to
Next
meet
time
at
you
the
come up
Keg?
to Ottawa.
I haven't been up to Ottawa in a while. I used to go to Canada when I worked for Mitel back in the day, but it's been a minute.
Yeah, well, whenever you hire an SE out of Ottawa and you want to come and see him, drop by.
Yeah, I'd love to. In the summer, probably, but yeah, definitely.
The best time to visit Canada is in February. Anyway, moving on.
All right.
What would you change about your current role?
I'm pretty happy with my current role. I mean, like I'm new to this role, so running sales engineering for the Americas is a really great, juicy role for me. That's going to allow me to make my mark, better our sales engineers, have a seat at the table with leadership. All of these things are really great. I think at the moment, I'm pretty happy about it. It's like little things I might change about the reporting structures and things like that. But otherwise, I don't have a lot I would change about my role. The role of sales engineers in general, though, I do have something to say about that.
All right.
Which is, in general, I don't think sales engineers are valued enough in almost any company. And I would like to see like the equivalent of the SVP of sales in sales engineering in a lot of companies, because it's so crucial to making a sale in technology, to moving the needle forward for most companies. Yet it's undervalued. You have VPs of sales engineering reporting up to VPs of sales, or customer success. They, in general, do not have a seat at the leadership table, and I think that really needs to change.
We were talking about Vivin a little bit earlier. The CEO is a former SE,
Yeah.
And he created the role of senior vice president for sales engineers. They report straight to him, mainly because of that. So hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see that change over the next few years, because a lot of people are kind of advocating for sales engineering these days.
I'd love to see that. I get an email every day from Vivin, by the way. Yeah, I'm on one of those lists.
I get an email from Vivian trying to sell me stuff, and I work with them. So
Yeah, yeah. They're
anyways,
doing a wine tasting. I was like, oh, that's not bad.
it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Benny, question number 3.
Yeah, well, maybe wine is a good tool to kind of like get nice people to get more involved with SEing. But what are some books, tools, or resources that you may recommend for people that want to learn more about sales engineering or want to better their craft around it?
Can I just say, like, self-help books are like, they're just okay for me. Like, yeah, I mean, they all seem so like wise when I read them, but I also like forget about everything and just wind up like pivoting to common sense a lot of the time. So what I would like to say is, don't just read self-help books. Read novels. Pick up a novel. Read the newspaper. Pick up the New York Times or some great Canadian paper.
New York Times.
You know, read articles, read biographies of people that you admire, and just, you know, up-level yourself as a human. I think that's the advice I would give. Yeah, there's great self-help books out there. I hear about them all the time, but they don't work for me. I just don't remember stuff from them.
Fair. Maybe to quickly piggyback off that, I'm very much the same way, or even just kind of talking about what we were talking about earlier around needing to be very interested in what you do for your role. I find that when I'm reading a book about something that, I don't know, I don't really have the biggest, like reading a sales book, for example, I had to do that at my last company. I think I fell asleep more times than I did reading textbooks back in school. Like, unless you have a vested interest in it, that's beyond just somebody telling you to do something or somebody telling you that you have to think a certain way. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very much a fan of that same ideology you have there. Whereas reading like biographies of people you care about, you want to learn more about them because you care about it, and
Yeah,
far more compelling.
pursue your passions. What's that? That's all like
all my self-help books.
Yeah.
Did you like them, Ramsey? Like, obviously, like, to each their own. Like, different people have different things that work for them. But did you like them?
I'm just leaving them there because
that's for Ramsey. Like, do you like them? Was the question.
Yeah, I do. Depends on which ones. Like, there are some that are just useless. Like everybody talks about Think and Grow Rich as like the major self-help book. I couldn't listen through 15 minutes of that because basically the point was be obsessed. It's like, okay, thanks. Like, I'll leave my family and be obsessed. But like, there's Atomic Habits. The book Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books. It's just about building habits, right? Like building habits to read a novel, for example, if you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, depends on the book.
Yeah, it's probably full of wisdom, but you know,
I probably wouldn't remember it.
Yeah.
No, there's a couple. Like, I've read the book The One Thing. I've read that 17,000 times, or listened to it 17,000 times. It's hard to implement when you're in sales engineering because you're being bombarded from all different places. But Atomic Habit, I really enjoyed.
By the way, my new thing is listening to like podcasts like around about sales engineering. That's like really directed, like, you know, great knowledge, some really funny sayings. Like, I love that POC one. PO is coming instead of proof of concept.
Yeah.
I loved Max saying, for being proactive, he said that, you know, you don't want to be aggressively waiting by the phone.
Yeah.
I love that to me was hilarious. But also, I'm learning a lot. Like, you have so many inspirational people on your podcast. It's great. And that's like, what a superb way for an SE to learn, especially like a young one. But even for me, I'm learning stuff all the time from them.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Last question of the not so fire round. What, in your opinion, separates the great SEs from the not so great or just okay ones?
So look, it's going to come back to raising your hand. I heard a lot in some of your previous podcasts about curiosity, and I think that's also super important. Like you want to ask the customer a lot of questions because you want to find out what their pain point is and what's motivating them to buy. That's common sense. And I agree with that, but I think like raising your hand is super important. So that means like, hey, you've got a Slack and somebody ask a technical question and you're always the guy to answer. And by the way, like after a little while, people start to notice that and you become the domain expert in that. Or tapping me on the shoulder and saying, what's it like to be an SE, when we're at SKO? I kind of, I think it'd be really interesting to do that. You raised your hand. Like if you raise your hand, I guarantee you're on my radar. Maybe I don't want to hire you, but maybe I do, or maybe I'll think of you for another role, or maybe I'll think of you when I hear about a role outside the company. So you need to put yourself out there. I think SEs that do this, they are the better SEs. And raising your hand might also mean like collaborating and sharing, right? So tribal knowledge is really bad. We want to share everything we know how to do so that like others don't have to recreate, from scratch. But it also might mean like, sharing with your knowledge with the community, publishing a KB article that has more of a reach, or the blog, or being on a podcast, or writing a white paper, like all of these things that just contribute to like your company's success as a whole and your development as a person. That's what I love in an SE. And like when I see that, I'm like obsessed about it as you manage that one thing for me is like the SE that, has raised their hand.
All right. We just came up with a title, Raising Your Hand, Become a Better SE.
Yeah.
All right.
Unfortunately, the first half is going to be like how I was a bad SE and became a good SE.
Hey man, it's a transition. Everybody loves a journey, right? At least a good journey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think our interview sounds like your other interviews. I'm not sure how much I'm going to promote it.
Well, the point is you're the head of sales engineering in Americas, so
yeah,
you did something right. It's okay to start slow.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think there's a lot that a lot of people I think are going to take out of this. Like, I don't know, just the like people who aren't in SE right now but are interested in the role, I think will be compelled by just how human and accessible you make it sound. But then for those that are SEs right now that are maybe looking to move up or move elsewhere, they now kind of know the types of conversations they should or could be having. And for SE leaders out there, you've given them a whole new way, if they aren't already doing this, to motivate their employees and maybe be better as a leader. So, I mean, I think you're hitting all the boxes for everybody that you can reach out to. So I don't know, I'm looking forward to this being.
And just to note, like there might be other SEs that are in the same boat as you were, and they may not be like, they may just be thinking that this is not the role for them, but it could be just a different company that could work for them. So
that's true. Yeah.
Those are the SEs that don't raise their hand, that they're just happy to to do their thing. And some of them are great, dependable SEs that do their job, but that's what they're going to continue to do, that job.
Some just need a nudge, and this could be it.
Some might not be ready to grow or want to grow also. That's okay too, that you can just be really good at what you're doing and quietly do your job. But, I'm not going to be compelled to to promote you or to, or to give you other opportunities. Yeah, that might be okay with those kind of people though.
Yeah, they might be okay with those kind of people, or they could be like you and they just needed to find the right spot for them, right? So it doesn't matter as long as everybody's happy in the end, because, why live life unhappy?
I agree.
Right.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So if people want to reach out to you and chat with you a little bit more, where can they do that?
Twitter is great. LinkedIn is great. So Twitter is at RMOHR, Rmore.
Okay.
And LinkedIn is Russ Moore, Mobileiron. You should be able to find me.
Awesome. Thanks, Russ. We appreciate the time you just spent with us. We'll put everything in the show notes, and hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, let's go to the keg.
Yeah, come up.
I will. Next time I'm in Ottawa, I'm definitely going to look you guys up. I love what you're doing. So thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
It's our pleasure. All right. Well, that's the end of the show. Benny wasn't able to join me, by the way, for the intros and outros today, just because I needed to get them out so we can actually start editing as soon as possible. But he was, as you noticed, on the show, and it was just a great conversation between Benny, me, and Russ. So thank you, Russ, for coming on. Thank you for actually opening up and having that chat with us. I hope it helps a lot of people who are in the same position that you were at some point. And if you guys, the listeners, if you know someone who's in that space right now, share this with them. Let them know that he's not alone or she's not alone, because someone's been there at some point in their lives. It's not all roses and sunshine. So I have a favor to ask. If you haven't left a rating or review on your viewing platform, whether it's Google Play or Apple Play or whatever, Spotify, whatever it is, I request that you guys do that for us. It shows that this is a legitimate show with 140 episodes, as you can see here. So that's it. I don't want to delay this any longer. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being here. And I will see you guys next time. For the Missing Benny, this is Ramsey signing off.